With me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenrewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Also here, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, then Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Wale Gomez, Managing Director of Quant Capital Limited. Well, very quickly, we had an extensive discussion with Monde Ubani, former Vice President of the Nigerian Bar Association, on what happened yesterday in Lagos at the Lekki Tollgate, Occupy Lekki Tollgate, and how the police handled that. Well, Professor Akintenrewa, you were sitting just next to Monde Ubani in the studio. Would you like to respond to some of the issues he raised and some of his observations? Quickly.
Yeah, he made a number of points. Let's begin with his viewpoint on not being hasty in withdrawing membership of the panel of inquiry that was required to look into the incident of October 2020. I don't share his view because his view does not take into recognition the nature, the attitudinal disposition of both the people and government agents in Nigeria. For instance, by the time you are asking them, quote and unquote, I like that expression, panel beating, the panel of inquiry will not do anything. If, for instance, on the basis of the 2 or 3 points made by Ebun-Olu Adegboruwa, 3 arguments that are powerful, put together to say that, look, investigations cannot be said to have been technically completed. They are asking, for instance, that, look, who authorized the removal of the footage info?
The CCTV?
The CCTV
TV cameras.
All that will require, that will enable the panel to know who did what, to know whether or not the Nigerian military officers did kill. In fact, the litigious questions, what will enable good, objective answers to them, they were not allowed. The forensic experts were not allowed. And on this basis, Ebun-Olu made it clear that no, the court shouldn't have, under normal circumstances,
the panel
shouldn't have allowed, such recommendation at all. And in this case, the investigations are still on. There are still other petitions. So without having to be a lawyer, without having to be a learned person, I think there is good logic in the point raised by Ebun-Olu Adegboruwa to now say, look, he's considering the possibility of withdrawing. I think the ideal thing is to join Uduala, Rinu, to withdraw. And then we now know if there is not going to be justice. We have been living in a world of injustice in this country. So there is no big deal. We all know that one. So in this case, for the panel to now want to give us the impression that they are working towards justice and fairness, no, it's not correct. The second point, I agree with him that the panel was set up by the Lagos State government, and that under normal circumstances, if the panel were to make any recommendation, it will go through the government, through the governor, who empaneled the group. So the panel should not just on its own make recommendation and begin to enforce it. As a matter of fact, when you take a look at the whole scenario, how, for God's sake, can it be said that Muhammadu Buhari's administration has not learned any good lesson from the ENDSARS protests of October 2020? The protest was against police brutality. And now, look at it. Just again, the brutality continues. No, it's most unfortunate.
Well, Mr. Gomez, you are a major stakeholder in Lagos. Or should I say,
in Nigeria.
This is your state. You know, what's your take on what happened yesterday and some of the points raised by Monday Ubani?
Well, obviously, if you're going to start from the beginning, we knew from the word go that nothing will come out of this, because we all know that things like this are just created to sweep the things under the carpet. But be that as it may, I want to go along with you that the reasoning for the protest in the first place have not been sorted out. So if the reasoning have not been sorted out and the people are saying we want to go back and express ourselves, I think it's their right as Nigerians to do that. Where I'm having problem is anywhere in the world, you have the right to express yourself. The moment the military comes with all sorts of gadgets to want to prevent that, that becomes a very dangerous issue. And that's where I'm having a problem, where I like the strategy that the youths or the protesters use to calm down and find a way of solving this problem. Personally, I wasn't even taking interest in all these, what they call it, it's not a court, but that the get-together, a gathering, because the facts were not being displayed. We are not seeing the actual truth that we should see. If sincerity of purpose was supposed to be at stake, then we should be able to note all the facts without anything held back. Nothing has been held back, but there's a difference between so many structures in Lagos State that have been messed up. Why are we concentrating on this? Why are we in a hurry to open up the thing? As people living in, I live in Lekki, and the stress going through that. I mean, it was like I was discussing with one of us, the joy of doing that, you're going home. This is our right. We should be able to have free access. Then they should tell us who owns that place, because we don't even know who owns it. If it's Lagos State, let's know it's Lagos State. Let's see how much you're paying and how much is the net profit, and see what they've done with the difference. But we don't even know. They're saying it's not LCC, it's not Lagos. Lagos doesn't own LCC. So that's just mine. I just don't believe in all this.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wale Gomez. We'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. When we return, the show will continue. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintonowa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Arise News Analyst, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Wale Gomez, Managing Director of Quant Capital Limited. Well, I mean, let me come to you very quickly, Yemi Adamolekun. I don't know, were you at the toll gate yesterday, or you were part of the protest on social media? But what's your take about the performance of the police, the treatment of the protesters, and the kind of feedback that we've been getting from both the government side and the people's side of the equation?
Thank you. Let me start by sort of addressing the issue. So, sorry, I don't mind if I don't speak for the rest of the show, but I really have a lot to say about this particular point. Let me start by those who said that those who went out should have known what they were expecting, that they went out wanting to be heroes and covered by the news. Part of the fundamental issue is what you yourself spoke about, Dr. Abati. The Commissioner of Police had said no protest would be allowed. Mr. Ubani spoke extensively around what the law says. Or might I say, the day before, on another station, the said Commissioner of Police said they are there to maintain law and order, that anybody who wants to protest is welcome to do so. I heard this myself. So one is the conflicting signals that the same Commissioner of Police gave. One, protests are not allowed. Secondly, protests are allowed as long as people are peaceful. Secondly, the Attorney General of Lagos State issues a statement on behalf of Lagos State stating a false, basically lying about a COVID protocol of 50 people in an outdoor space. Doesn't make any sense, but he could put that in writing, saying that as people can protest as long as they don't violate COVID protocols. This is the same Lagos state where the federal government of Nigeria is insisting that citizens must register for the NIN number. And we've seen the crowds that have shown up at NIMC offices. Neither has Lagos state said one word, much less a sentence, much less issue a press statement, if they're so concerned about the welfare of Lagosians being cooped up together because of COVID. That's point number one. So underlying, that's Lagos in that regard. And then it's the issue of freedom of speech. As you and again, as Mr. Obani said, and footage show, even before anything happened, people were being shoved, were being arrested, passers-by were being arrested, who hadn't done anything. So not only this their fake COVID protocol, but not done anything illegal, violated any law, being shoved into a Black Maria, being told, and the audacity to record it, to say that you people are NSAS, Abi, you will see. Because the person who obviously recorded that video that had Debo in it was a police officer. So he was bold enough to record that and then release it to the public. So that, I think, is the video we're showing. So that tells you very clearly that the police of Nigeria, the police force in Nigeria, is so emboldened, so I don't even know the word, that they think this is okay to do, that I can record citizens being dehumanized in this way, and then release it to the public because I know, as they say, nothing will happen. In Debo's video, he said the same thing, that they were beaten, and the police officer told them that night for night, we will kill you and nothing will happen. So again, to Mr. Obani's point, it shows that not only the police hasn't learned from what happened last year, it's as if the vengeance against what happened last year is what they're now using to attack citizens. And it's also instructive. This thing happened on Saturday. It's now Sunday evening. We have not heard a word from the IG of police, unless I missed it. Now, this is the same IG who was all about police reform. They made demands. We listened to them, blah, 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 blah. Hasn't said anything what is glaringly affirmation of this issue of police abuse. And then to the panel and LCC. I completely agree with Mr. Obani that the panel was hasty in their decision. But I think more importantly, they didn't have the powers to determine if the toll gate should start operating or not. The toll gate is owned by Lagos State. There's no doubt about that at all. So Lagos State hiding behind LCC, who is an employee of Lagos State, if you want to think about it, as managers, they're managing the toll gate, but it's a Lagos State asset. So why is Lagos State in a hurry to start using the asset again? When, as people who came out to protest, and as Renu and other members of the panel said, the investigation is not complete. LCC has failed to cooperate in certain areas. The army has failed to show up. But in the midst of all of this, the priority of the Lagos State government is to take back ownership of the asset. And might I add, unlike October, when Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the governor of Lagos State, was very quick to respond, very quick to engage citizens, very quick to show that he's a governor of the people. In this situation, unless I've missed it again, Governor Sanwo-Olu has not said one word. And might I add as well, that in his reporting of ENDSARS last year, every time he went to see Mr. President, he would say ENDSARS aftermath. ENDSARS protesters on police brutality, which we saw yesterday, were not the people that burnt down Lagos. So framing it in that way, wrong on its own, but then fast forward 3 months, this has happened again in Lagos. As the sitting governor, the chief security officer of the state, you have not said one word. That alone speaks volumes. And then lastly, I want to end with the actions of the mobile court. Mr. Ubani praised them, and I'm not quite sure what's there to be praised. The protesters should not have been arrested in the first place. The process to get them out on bail was arduous, but be that as it may. Renu decided to leave the panel because, as she said, she could see, in the sense as others have said, the writing on the wall that this panel is not set up to deliver justice. Now, you can say youthful exuberance, you can say inexperience, but you must not disdain that for a young woman who not only participated in the protest, chose to represent young people on the panel, but when she felt that what she was there to do was being undermined and would not achieve the set out objectives, chose to make a statement and step out should be commended, not to be disdained because of her youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, I mean, we've said a lot on this subject, but what do you think should be the way forward? How do we resolve this tension between the people and government and Lekki Tollgate, which is supposed to be a symbol of public-private partnership, now the cemetery of fundamental human rights?
It's a big tragedy what's happening right now regarding the attempt by government to escape accountability for what happened in October. That for me is the biggest problem. Government is trying not to hold people accountable or hold itself accountable, and it seems to me that there's just an attempt to gaslight the whole country, a way of controlling people by creating false narratives. We need to get to the facts in order to heal and move forward. But what will that happen? I doubt it, because accountability will not be palatable given what is alleged or perceived to have happened on the night of October 2020. How can we learn lessons from what happened when we're not facing it, when we're not discussing it, when we're trying to sweep it under the carpet, when we're trying to lie about what happened? Clearly, as somebody said, police brutality was the reason there was the ENDSARS protest. And from what we saw yesterday, the police haven't learned much. It was a departure from what it used to be. It was a slightly better outing, I must say. Well, was it perfect? No, it wasn't. But it could have been worse, and it used to be worse than this in years past. So how can we learn lessons from what happened when we are not talking about what happened? And what happened, we must remember. We must try to remember what happened is that the ENDSARS protests were peaceful. Initially, the protests were peaceful, and then it appeared that government sponsored some thugs to infiltrate the protests. It was alleged that government or some other forces sponsored these people who set police stations on fire, who set prisoners free in order to be able to stop the protests. And the culmination of all of that was what happened on October 2020 at Lekki Tollgate. My house is a walking distance from that tollgate, and I'm still haunted till today by what we witnessed, by what we heard on that night. So let nobody tell you that nothing happened. What happened, they need to tell us. Government needs to come clean so that this does not happen again. That's my take on this matter.
Well, thank you very much, Modele Sharafa Yusuf. Let's move quickly to our next topic. And Modele, please be on standby. You will be the first to comment on this subject. Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande, popularly known as LKJ, died at the age of 91 on Thursday. Alhaji Jakande, a former journalist, was the first civilian governor of Lagos State from 1979 to 1983. He later served as Minister of Works under the military government of General Sani Abacha. His administration as Lagos State governor left a legacy of massive infrastructure development during his 4-year tenure, especially through numerous estates that he built across the state, as well as his monumental investments in education, health, transportation, and roads construction, among others. His body has since been laid to rest, and our Arise correspondent Tokumbo Oyetunji has this report. Let's take a look.
Dust to dust for 91-year-old former Governor Lateef Jakande, who passed on a day before. Dignitaries led by Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and his deputy are here to pay their last respect to a man described by many as a role model in governance and public administration.
A great man, that served his people when they had the opportunity, that cared for people. He was a fantastic journalist. I was talking to somebody that said he was the first graduate to be employed in Tribune in 1965. He was talking about Abacha Jakande as the MD there. So he has done a lot of first. But I remember him more because when I finished in 1986 in UI, he came to my graduation ceremony and I was just perplexed.
His stay in public office was exemplary, and that is attested to by the amount of tributes that have poured in from different categories of Nigerians since the news of his death broke on Thursday. These artisans are among many others who will not for anything miss out the opportunity to say a final goodbye to the man who touched their lives positively in many ways.
How to spend frugally the little that you have to reach as many as you can get. That's what he did in respect of low-cost housing and schools and so on. Those schools were not the best in terms of physical facilities, but at least it served a purpose, reached out to so many their worry kids who might never have received education under the vision. The only thing was frustrated from achieving was the tram road, the monorail that he wanted to introduce to Lagos, which would have eased the heavy congestion we're having.
The event here is a culmination of a moderate burial ceremony that started in the early hours of the day at the Ilupeju residence of Alhaji Jakande, who started life out as a journalist and went on to become a governor of Nigeria's biggest state economy, leaving an envious mark. The Islamic prayers followed by his lying in state, where different individuals filed out to pay glowing tributes.
When Jakande became governor in 1979, he won with barely over 500,000 votes. When he won the election for his second term in 1983, he won with over 1.5 million votes. It was never recorded that Jakande was sharing rice, or sharing box of matches, or giving people 1,000 naira to vote. The people wanted to protect a government that gave them an opportunity to have housing, that gave them opportunity to have free education. I went to Lagos State University.
Well, the burial of Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande there. Major loss to the journalism profession, to politics, to the governance community in Nigeria. But we'll take a short break now here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. When we return, we'll have the panelists comment on the legacy of LKJ. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office of Arise News Analyst, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Wale Gomez, Managing Director of Quant Capital Limited. Well, before we went on break, we saw that report by Tokumbo Uyetunji, Arise News correspondent, on the burial of Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande, first civilian governor of Lagos State. He was governor 1979 to 1983. But even more importantly, he's an icon, a legend in the journalism profession in Nigeria, before he then moved from journalism into politics. Well, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, we have the privilege of having you, a veteran journalist yourself, on this program. I would like to start with you to comment on the legacy of Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande.
Well, Alhaji Jakande is a true legend. He is a true founding father of Lagos State. That's literally and figuratively. He, along with great Lagosians like Dr. Teslim Elias and General Mobolaji Johnson, were the architects of the creation of Lagos State. And not only did he achieve that, he went on to be one of the icons of development in the state. We cannot talk about Alhaji Lateef Jakande's legacy without talking about the low-cost housing estates across the state, the development of infrastructure, especially the Lagos-Ekpe Road, which opened Lagos up in his time. We can't talk about his legacy without talking about the Lagos State University, which he founded, and so many other things. As somebody said earlier, he won the elections in 1979 with about 82% of the vote. And as you well know, politicians don't always, their profile doesn't always, is not always on the ascension once they get into office. Their stars tend to dip. But not only did he get re-election in 1983, he won 91% of the vote. Which was, he just clearly blew everybody out of the waters before the military stepped in. He has remained well respected. He remained well respected in the society until he passed away. I recall interviewing him once, and I was blown away by his humility, by his simplicity, by his love for the country. I remember visiting his house, and he was this icon that was held in such high esteem in the modest neighborhood in which he lived. He lived in a nice modest neighborhood in Lagos State. And when thank you very much. He wasn't living in Victoria Land like all of the other leaders. And when I remember when we were looking for the house, and I said, I'm going to Alhaji Jakande's house, you could see the way the people were very protective of him. They said, where are you from? Why are you going to his house? I said I was a journalist, and they led me there with so much pride. And I recall meeting with him. He was this very humble man who still had his wits around him. I'm talking about 2 years ago. But he's passed on now. His legacy in free education is there for people to continue to point at. The only thing I recall that I think was a minus was the fact that while giving free education to the state, his government, like that of Bola Ige in Oyo State at the time, decided to do away with the boarding houses. Many of us who grew up in boarding houses know how that tends to impact it. It helps you to grow from that little girl or little boy that was at home under the care of your parents. It taught you independence. It helped you to make friends for life. But that I think was something that maybe they shouldn't have done, but they did it. He's, as I said, his legacy lives on. One thing that I want to that strikes me though is what he said on the day of his inauguration, and which still holds true today, 42 of his first inauguration, which still holds true today, 42 years after that inauguration. He said, and I quote when he was giving his speech, he said, Lagos State is said to be the most developed part of the Federation, but I also know that below the majestic flyovers, the mystifying roads, the mystifying ring roads, and the spiraling skyscrapers, there is abject poverty in this state. And I know that there are in Lagos some of the worst living conditions that can be found in any part of the Federation. He went on to say that perhaps our need is greater as Lagos State because of the pressure of population, which is the highest in the country. The demand for services is extremely severe. Besides, Lagos State is Nigeria's shop window. Lagos State remains Nigeria's shop window, and all of those problems that Alhaji Lateef Jakande talked about in that his first speech 42 years ago, they're still here with us, and it is beholding on this government, on this new generation, to find solutions to those problems. Ruben.
Well, thank you very much, Modeli. I'm tempted to also offer my own tribute, but I would hold my fire. But what we should note is that this has been a very tough week for the Nigerian journalism community, because the very day that another icon of the journalism profession was being buried at the Grey Land, that's Prince Tony Momo, was the day that Alhaji Lateef Jakande passed on. And these were major figures in modern Nigerian journalism. But let me come to you quickly, Mr. Gomez. You are a Lagosian, and you cannot claim not to know Alhaji Lateef Jakande.
Where do we want to start about Alhaji Lateef Jakande. The true definition of a servant leader, if you want to define a servant leader or servant leadership, the role model you pick is Alhaji Jakande, because he was completely ready to serve the community. He had a focus. He knows where he wants to take Lagos. It's not just coming in and just Brazil everybody and just get things done. He had a focus. He had the plan for housing. He had a plan for transportation. He had a plan for everything. And was putting them. Of course, what Model was saying the other time that the boarding school. I went to a boarding school, and I don't know how anybody could survive going to secondary school without being in the boarding school. That was the fun. But he took that away because he needed to. I can see Dr. Ruben smiling. See, those are the beginnings of a life, and he took that away for. But at least it was for him to be able to have funds to build the educational system of life. He's a true servant leader. He's an epitome of perfection. Now, let's go to when he was a works minister. Though under Abacha, which is another thing. But when he was a works minister, he made his mark, which means his DNA is to get things done at the appropriate time. With the little resources he's got, he had things done. And honestly, may his soul rest in perfect peace. He's a role model for me personally.
Yes,
and
talking about when he was Minister of Works.
Yeah.
It was under his watch that the Lugbe housing estate was built.
Yes.
And also the famous Guanakpa housing estate was also
he did that.
built.
And I just pray that someone will come over Lagos and take over from him for where he did and what someone can do better than that. I haven't seen anybody that can touch Jakande.
Well, let's hope that all the governors who have been praising him will try to learn from his example.
Yes.
He was the man that constructed the Lekki Road. He was the man that built up Lekki Axis, and he did not have a plot of land in Lekki. No. He remained, as Modele pointed out, among the people in the humble neighborhoods of Ilukweju.
Yeah.
Now, ordinary local government chairmen now have mansions in Lekki. They have all over the world, But,
and then siren going left, right, and center. This guy didn't use any siren.
Yes, and this was the point Afenifere made, that he led as a man of integrity. We'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. When we return, the program will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me here in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough. Arise News Analyst, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Wale Gomez, Managing Director of Quant Capital Limited. And before we went on that break, we've been discussing Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande, icon, legend in the journalism profession, first civilian governor of Lagos State, Nigeria, former Minister of Works, who died on Thursday at the age of 91. Yemi Adamolekun, let me come to you quickly before I go to Prof. Hello, is Yemi Adamolekun there? Okay, very quickly, Prof. I know you wrote this book in which you talked about one of the major projects of the Jakande administration, the Metro Line. It's one of the chapters in one of your books. And that was dream deferred, dream truncated, dream aborted. And many Nigerians today are saying that if the Lagos Metro Line project had worked, perhaps Lagos would not be as congested or as problematic in terms of transportation as it is today.
Yeah, your observation is quite right. And I would simply say that, like Simon Kolawole rightly pointed out, giving us two examples. One lesson from Lateef Kayode Jakande is that you can always mean well, but the society itself is likely a function. Jakande meant well. The examples given by Simon Kolawole, I like that too. The first one was that he reminded us that when he was governor-elect in 1979, he advised, he urged headmasters, principals of schools not to rush to go and pay school fees. Why? Because, UPN will have a free education. Ebitu Okiwe was then the incumbent governor. So already Jakande, before getting there, he was asking people, please do not pay any school fees. So in this case, as an action governor, before he even resumed, you can already see his attitudinal disposition. The second example that Simon Kolawole gave, he referred to our brother colleague, KK, Kayode Komolafe, that he had an accident in February 1984, and he had to be rushed here and there. By that time, the cost of medication without free healthcare system put in place by Jakande, that he would have died. And I love that. Now, when I link that one to the issue of metro line, I look at it that, look, this Jakande, he dreams always of development, solving the problem of the poor, etc. When he came up with the idea of the metro line, two issues were raised. Funding. Then, how do you get the best in terms of funding, the cost? We had Misui in Japan. We have the French consortium in France, Inter-Infra. Now, when an international tender was called for, the Japanese quoted the lowest first, but they were unable to do it. The French who came second, which came second, quoted initially 590 million naira, not dollars, only 590 million naira. But the Japanese quoted by that time 400 million naira. Jakande opted for what is cheaper. But in all, the point that should be noted there, please, is this. When a second tender was placed, 689 million naira, that was what the French were insisting on. Mudashiru, Bolahan, Mudashiru came in. They claimed, they argued, they asked Ojetunji Aboyade to investigate. But you see, they cancelled, they denounced the agreement. 689 million, they refused to pay. But when the matter was referred to court in Europe, Nigeria eventually paid 675 million. In fact, the court fined Nigeria 1,184,000. And in this case, Nigeria had to beg for reduction to 675 rather than pay 689. You can see that. That is Jakande for you. What he did well, people try to rubbish under whatever reasons. But I think that Jakande will live well. The same thing for the housing estate he did.
Well, at this point, I would like to go to Yemi. Yemi, it looks like Governor Jakande, as he then was, belonged to a different era. At his time, there was Bola Ige in Oyo State. There was Ambrose Ali in the old Bender State. And in, I think, Imo State. At that time, there was D. Sam Mbakwe, who was also a very productive governor who was loved by his people. But today, we seem to have these governors that are neither this nor that. What happened to governance in Nigeria?
Indeed, I think what happened to governance is that governance stopped being about people and stopped being accountability, integrity, started being personal aggrandizement, let me put it that way. And I think it's instructive, as Odele just shared, that the way Governor Jakande was while he was in office is pretty much how he stayed till his death. He didn't tweak. Yeah. And we say those things not because those living are bad people. It's a part of Lagos. You're more than welcome to live to there. But it's just a reflection of our politics where people, local government chairman, or technically live in Lekki. So for Governor Jakande to choose not to have moved, he saw no reason to. He didn't define himself by where he lived and what he had acquired. And I think for me that's the lesson, not that he could, but that as a person, that's how he defined himself. I think it also speaks to vision. Obviously, Governor Jakande had a vision for what he wanted Lagos to, what he thought Lagos could be, and the quote that was in that clip talked about there is poverty, as good and fancy as Lagos might look like, there is poverty in Lagos, and he was determined to ease the burden on the lives of Lagosians. As you said, he was part of Southwest Awo, and their different states were quite close. And even though we don't do a good job of teaching the history of those who have gone ahead, as someone had said, his legacy will live on strongly after him because they are tangible things. So as Modeli said, she was mentioning things that he built. So you're not just talking about him in abstract, you can point to the things that he did, and that's where history will find him, regardless of what I try to say or not. Those things are tangible. You can touch them, you can, and they are living testaments. But lastly, not many people have talked about this, but I really also want to talk about his role in Abacha administration. Not a favorite of the AWO at the time because of his role. And unfortunately, he's also one person who probably didn't come out of that as it affected people, progressives who later served in military government. And it's from him to people like Taisholari. I think it's probably to date only Wole Soyinka who has survived medallions with military administration to the degree that it's being referred to. But again, just reemphasizes the choices that we and how history judge us based on that written about us. But more importantly, that the things that we do and how we ultimately be the best way that history will. And that, for me, is his legacy.
Yes, thank you very much, Yemi. But quickly, before we take a break, let's take our next topic. With no provision of subsidy in the 2021 budget, and the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC's inability to continue to bear the cost of under-recovery, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Sylva, and the Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Mele Kyari, have asked Nigerians to anticipate a hike in the price of petrol as the price of crude oil climbs above $60 per barrel. Currently, petrol sells between 159 and 162 naira across filling stations nationwide, with the price band set when crude oil sold for about $40 per barrel in November 2020.
We're still working on the fine details, but it's very clear to everybody that there is no provision in the budget for subsidy. And of course, you know that rising prices of crude oil also will mean a little increase of product prices. So we expect that will happen. For now, NNPC is taking all the hit, but that cannot continue forever. So we believe that Nigerians should brace up for a little bit of increase. And as we are taking the pleasure of higher prices of crude oil, let us also brace up to take a little bit of the pain on the side of higher product prices.
And this is a tough challenge that we are dealing with to make sure that we're able to keep this country wet. Despite all the challenges, we have a clear directive of government to deregulate the downstream sector. Engagements are going on with labor so that we have a structure that will ensure that there is no exploitation of the ordinary person by the vagaries of the market.
Well, Mr. Gomez, let me start this with you. You are the businessman, in the house right now. the federal government made it very clear in April that market forces would henceforth determine the pump price of petrol, which means that, look, it will not be the PPPRA or NNPC or any government agency fixing prices. But many Nigerians are saying that, look, no, that's not possible. Labour, Trade Union Congress is threatening that there will be trouble if the pump price of fuel should go up. But I guess TUC forgot that in December, the federal government, did not allow market forces to work. So what exactly are we doing? Do we have a deregulated downstream sector, or we still have a subsidy regime, or should Nigerians, as we've been advised, prepare to pay more?
Well, definitely when you're looking at the price of anything, it's a factor of demand and supply. That's the basic concept. But because we're so used to being subsidized, we got this internal comfort that will be subsidized. But it's gotten to a point where reality has to face us in the face. That subsidy is not going to work again. We have to let the market forces determine the pump price of what we're going to. But be that as it may, we also look at the social factor to this. We're Nigerians, and we're the owners of the crude, and we should benefit from being owners of this crude by government just doing something to ameliorate the process. By increasing supply, you bring more income in, and then you can use it for other things to alleviate the sufferings of the people. The reality is coming to bear. Demand and supply is going to be effect, and because they have not put that in the budget, there's nowhere they can get the money to subsidize. So it's coming to us right now, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Well,
it's going to be
on that note, let's take another commercial break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday Talk Show. We'll be right back shortly. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Wale Gomez, Managing Director of Quant Capital Limited. Well, Prof, let me come to you. Will you be willing to respect market forces and pay more at the retail stations for fuel? However, some people say we have other issues. Why don't we get our refineries working? Why don't we address the issue of foreign exchange with all these multiple conflicting foreign exchange regimes? And then, of course, why don't we break the monopoly of the NNPC, which seems to be a major part of the problem, why Nigerians have to pay more for what they have in their backyard?
You see, the constant observation has always been that we have a very fraudulent system of government. One, how many times have we been told that there will no longer be subsidy? And then the following year, we will see that, yes, you tell us you are ending the subsidy system, and you are still subsidizing. How many times? So I think this is very, very fraudulent. It's not good enough. If I have the option of not buying, fuel in Nigeria, I will not buy. You have already raised this issue. Refineries, we are unable to address that critical issue. Why must we import what we are capable of producing? Why are we not producing for domestic needs and export to others? Now, we supply others, but we are unable to feed ourselves, to supply ourselves. Wale is talking about demand and supply. Fine. The demand is always there, but they couldn't supply. You can only supply only by importing. You only institutionalize mechanisms that will aid and abet corruption.
But we're almost through with our refinery, Dangote's refinery.
When we have it, then the argument will be different.
Yes, that's when we're going to enjoy the supply.
My position is this. The reality that we raise, that we are talking about, if we are able, if we are convinced, if we can see that the government means well, they are making good efforts to supply fuel as needed, then we can show preparedness to pay. We are only coerced to pay. What the government of Muhammadu Buhari has done well so far is that, okay, the issue of scarcity is no longer there. You can go into any filling station and buy. But the only problem there is the fraud again in the filling stations. You will read 2 liters, 10 liters. But they have reset their machines there. You couldn't get what you are paying for.
Well, Yemi, quickly, are you willing to pay more for fuel?
I'm not willing to pay. I mean, if we're deregulating the sector, and that's one of the things that's been, even from the finite, that was part of the conversation. What's the fully deregulate downstream so that we know that it's market. So Mobil can charge different Sahara or NU, whatever it is. But that's within a larger frame passing bills in the National Assembly to actually ensure that our largest foreign exchange earner works for all Nigerians. So we keep focusing on this narrow piece of this puzzle, which is for us. But there's a much larger piece of our whole ecosystem, how our largest foreign exchange is mismanaged, dismantling NNPC and all the issues surrounding. So for me, that's the larger conversation that, again, the federal government is still willing to have. The same way we're doing with brutality and reform, the same way we're doing with education, tertiary education sector, is the same way we're doing this one. Lack of vision, we just spoke about Mr. Jakande. It's quite instructive before I forgot. It was under Buhari that the petrol lane was cancelled. And now Buhari has to sit and pay him a tribute as he dies. And I think the irony shouldn't be lost on us that continue to deal with these things in piecemeal until our visionary who are about service, servant leadership, and the people. Otherwise, we'll keep going in circles.
Well, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, let me come to you quickly. Fuel price hike, we're told, is imminent, given the increase in the spot price of crude oil.
It is imminent, Ruben. I'm not sure there's not much we can do about it. Painful as it may seem, deregulation is a necessary economic policy, and successive administrations have attempted to achieve deregulation without success. Some lacked the political will. For some people, it was not the appropriate time, it was not the right time. It can be argued that given the difficulties that the economy is in right now, given the pandemic, given the fact that there just isn't money in the system, it is not the right time to do this as well. But times are hard, but a man has to do what a man has to do. I guess that's what government is trying to do. Government has to take the tough decisions on behalf of the people. The problem, as I say it, is that if there wasn't so much corruption in the system, and when there's a feeling that government is working in the people's best interest, then bitter pills like this increase in fuel prices might not be as difficult to swallow as it is right now. That being said, we all know that the basic principle of deregulation is that if there's a direct correlation between the price of petroleum, of crude oil, and petroleum products. When the price of crude oil goes up, the price of petroleum products go up, and vice versa. So it is what it is. It is also worthy of note that other countries like Nigeria, which depends largely on importation of fuel for their economy, like India, which imports about 80% of what they need in petroleum products, they're also having this same conversation. As at yesterday, the Petroleum Minister of India was in Congress trying to defend increase in price in petroleum products prices. it is what it is. We have to learn to live with this. When the prices come down, as it did in December, the price of petroleum products will come down.
Okay, thank you very much, Modele Sharafa Yusuf. Just in about a minute, we'll take our final topic. The Senate has acquitted former President Donald Trump of inciting a riot at the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th. House Democrats who voted a month ago to charge Mr. Trump with incitement of insurrection needed 2/3 of the Senate, or 67 votes, to convict him. The Democrats argued in the short trial that Mr. Trump caused a violent attack by repeating for months the false claims that the election was stolen from him, and then telling his supporters gathered near the White House that morning to fight like hell to overturn his defeat. 5 people died when they then laid siege to the Capitol. Following his acquittal, former President Donald Trump says his movement has only just begun. In a lengthy statement, Trump thanked his attorneys and his defenders in the House and Senate, who he said, and I quote, stood proudly for the Constitution we all revere and for the sacred legal principles at the heart of our country, end of quote. Well, quickly, Prof, before we wrap this up today, do you think that this is a triumph for Trump? We have less than a minute to go.
No, I don't think it's we should be talking about triumph. Why? Like the minority leader himself said, that look, after the acquittal, there is still time for trial for other issues.
Well, thank you, Prof. You've been watching Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abacha. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next Sunday. Thank you.